I guess you could say I was always the other one. Not the first choice, not the one in the spotlight. That was Anna, my older sister. Everything from the start just came her way. Attention, gifts, you name it. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how I grew up. We lived in a decent enough house. Dad worked as a mechanic, and Mom was a part-time cashier. They weren't rolling in money, but somehow there was always enough for Anna. Me? I got the leftovers. One cold December evening, which pretty much set the tone for my childhood, we were sitting around the small dinner table. Anna was going on about some school project she aced. "Mom, Dad, my teacher said it was the best in the class." Anna beamed, her eyes lighting up in a way that made my parents practically glow with pride. "That's my girl. We knew those science kits were worth every penny," Dad said, his voice full of nothing but pride. Mom nodded. "We'll get you whatever you need, honey. You just keep up the good work." I poked at my food, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach. "Hey, I got an A on my math test," I mumbled, not sure why I bothered. "That's nice, Emily," Mom said, barely glancing my way. "Make sure you keep it up." No praise, no excitement. It was like scoring well was expected of me. Or worse, like it didn't even matter. I learned early on not to expect much. Christmas was a few weeks away, and the disparity in our living room was almost laughable. Under the tree, beautifully wrapped gifts piled up. All for Anna. I knew the routine. My gifts were usually things like socks or a book, nothing that screamed special. That year, it wasn't any different. Anna ripped through her presents with glee, uncovering new clothes, gadgets, and even a brand new laptop. "Oh my God, this is awesome! Thanks, Mom and Dad," she squealed. I unwrapped my own, a secondhand novel and a pack of plain shirts. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. When the holidays were over, things went back to the usual routine. Anna was the star, and I was just there. Aunt Sarah was the only one who seemed to notice. She dropped by now and then, always with a small gift just for me. Something that made me feel seen. But those visits stopped after one particularly ugly argument. I was coming home from school when I overheard them in the kitchen. "You can't keep doing this, John. You're ignoring your younger daughter," Aunt Sarah said, her voice stern and full of frustration. "Sarah, she doesn't need as much as Anna," Dad fired back, his tone harsh. "That's not the point. It's about showing both your daughters that you care." "Well, maybe if Emily was more like her sister, it wouldn't be so hard," Dad retorted, not realizing I was listening. Aunt Sarah saw me first, her face dropping as she caught my eye. I ran up to my room before I heard any more, the sting of tears hot on my cheeks. After that, Aunt Sarah wasn't allowed over anymore. Dad said she was causing trouble, stirring up drama that didn't exist. But it did exist. I lived it every day. After high school, it was like standing at the edge of a cliff. Anna was off to college with a fat check from Mom and Dad to cover her dorm, books, everything. Me? I got a pat on the back and a "good luck, Emily." I moved out not long after that. There was no drama, no teary goodbyes, just me packing my few things into old boxes and suitcases, while Mom watched, her face unreadable. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The place was shared with two other girls, Lisa and Jen, who were about as broke as I was, but with dreams just as big. "Welcome to the dungeon," Lisa joked on the day I moved in, showing me around the cramped space with a laugh. "We make it work, though. You got a job lined up?" "Starting at the diner tomorrow," I replied, dumping a box on the bed that would be mine. "And maybe something at the bookstore, part-time." "Good hustle," Jen nodded, her eyes approving. "We all pitch in for rent on the first, no exceptions." "Okay, got it," I assured her, already calculating my hours and expenses in my head. Working 2 jobs wasn't easy. The diner had me on my feet all day, taking orders, dodging the grumpy chef's temper, and smiling through it all. Nights or evenings I spent at the bookstore, shelving books and ringing up sales. The calm a stark contrast to the diner chaos. Months turned into a year, and saving up for college seemed like chasing a mirage. Just when I'd have a little put aside, something came up, like the time I got sick. It hit me out of nowhere. One day I was fine, the next I was burning up, barely able to get out of bed. Lisa found me like that, shivering under a pile of blankets. "Jesus, Em, you look like hell," she exclaimed, her face creased with concern. "You need a doctor." "I can't afford a doctor," I muttered, feeling the room spin a little. "We'll figure it out," she insisted, pulling out her phone. "There's a clinic. They charge based on what you earn. Don't be stubborn about this." The clinic was a crowded, weary place where the wait times could break you if the illness didn't. When my turn finally came, the doctor was a kind, tired-looking man who prescribed some meds and plenty of rest. "You need to take it easy," he advised, handing me a prescription. "Can you take some time off work?" I almost laughed. "Not really, but I'll see what I can do." Back at the apartment, I crunched the numbers. Meds, missed shifts, just scraping by on rent. It all added up too fast. My college fund, the little there was, dwindled to nothing after the medical ordeal. Draining my savings, I knew I had to face it. I needed help. Swallowing my pride, I decided to call home. It had been a while since we talked, not properly since I moved out. The phone rang, and I braced myself. "Mom, it's Emily." "Emily, this is unexpected. Everything okay?" Her voice was cautious, not warm or worried. "I need to ask a favor. Can I come home for a bit, just till I get back on my feet?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. There was a pause, the kind that tells you the answer won't be what you want to hear. "Oh, Emily, you know your sister just moved back in with her husband. They're using your old room. There's really no space." My heart sank, but I pushed on. "Can't we figure something out? Maybe I could sleep on the couch. It's just for a little while." There was another long pause. "I'm sorry, Emily. It's just not possible right now. Maybe when things settle down with Anna and the baby." I hung up and sat there, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. They had made their choice, and I wasn't it. I was on my own. Truly on my own. The next few days were a blur of applying for any job I could find, skipping meals to save a few bucks, and trying not to think about the fact that my own family had turned me away when I needed them the most. It was during one of my late-night job searches that I got a call from Aunt Sarah. "Emily, sweetheart, I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" Her voice was like a lifeline. "Hey, Aunt Sarah. I'm managing, just trying to figure things out. Listen, why don't you come stay with me for a while? You shouldn't be alone through this." I felt tears prick at my eyes, relief washing over me. "Really? Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "Of course I'm sure. You're not imposing. You're family, more than just when it's convenient. Pack your things and come over. We'll sort the rest out together." "Thank you, Aunt Sarah. Thank you so much," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Packing up my things again, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the rejection, but also the warmth of being welcomed without conditions. Aunt Sarah's place wasn't big, but it was filled with love, something that had been sorely missing for too long. When I arrived, Aunt Sarah was waiting at the door. She wrapped me in a big hug as soon as I stepped out of the cab. "You're home now, Emily. Let's not worry about anything else tonight," she said, ushering me inside. Life at Aunt Sarah's was different from anything I'd known. It was quiet, peaceful, and most importantly, I felt wanted. A few days after I moved in, Aunt Sarah and I sat down at her old, scarred kitchen table for some real talk. The morning sun spilled over the cluttered surface, turning the steam from our coffee cups into golden swirls. "So, Emily, what's the plan?" Aunt Sarah asked, her eyes locking onto mine with that direct, no-nonsense way she had. I took a deep breath, stirring my coffee slowly. "Honestly, Aunt Sarah, I want to go to college. I want to be a lawyer, but everything's just messed up right now." She nodded, tapping a finger on the table, thoughtful. "Lawyer, huh? That's a big dream, Emily. Big dreams are good. They keep us going, but they need big plans. What's stopping you?" "Money," I said flatly. "Money is stopping me. I've been working jobs, but it's never enough, especially not for law school." Aunt Sarah leaned back, her chair creaking slightly under the shift. "I might have a solution for that, but it comes with a condition." I frowned, curious and a bit wary. "What kind of condition?" "You get into college and I'll pay for it. But Emily, you've got to commit. No half measures. You work your tail off, you study hard, and you pass everything. Not just pass, excel. Can you do that?" Her offer floored me. It was more than I could have hoped for. "Yes, I can do that. I will, Aunt Sarah. Thank you." With that, we started planning. I applied to colleges that offered good law programs, crafting application letters late into the night. When the acceptance letter from a well-respected state college came, I actually pinched myself, thinking I was dreaming. I did it, Aunt Sarah. Getting in college was tough, law school even tougher. Aunt Sarah's financial support freed me from the constant stress of money, but it put another kind of pressure on me. The pressure to succeed, not just for myself, but for her too. As semesters passed, I not only met Aunt Sarah's expectations, I exceeded them. My grades were top of the class, and I landed an internship at a local law firm. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the firm, I came home to find Aunt Sarah in the kitchen, her expression more serious than usual. "Sit down, Emily. We need to talk." Worry pricked at my heart as I took a seat, noticing she wasn't her usual self. "What's wrong, Aunt Sarah?" She sighed, a long, heavy sound. "Nothing's wrong exactly. I just want you to know how proud I am of you. You've done more than I ever expected. You're going to be a great lawyer." Her praise warmed me, but her tone hinted at something unsaid. "Thanks, Aunt Sarah. I couldn't have done it without you." "That's not just it," she continued, her eyes serious. "You've got to start thinking about what comes next. You're about to fly, and I'm just glad I could give you the wings." During my final year of law school, I managed to secure a prestigious internship at a respected law firm downtown. The first day I walked into the towering building, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My supervisor, a sharp-tongued lawyer named Mr. Coleman, met me at his office door with a skeptical look. "So, you're the intern I've heard so much about, Emily?" His voice was gruff, his eyes scanning me like I was a case file he wasn't sure about. "Yes, sir. I'm here to learn and contribute as much as I can," I replied, my voice steady despite the butterflies dancing in my stomach. The work was intense. I spent days buried in legal research, drafting documents, and sometimes I was allowed to sit in on client meetings, observing the real dance of law. Mr. Coleman didn't hand out praise easily, but when he did, it stuck. One late evening, after everyone else had gone home, I was still at my desk, poring over a particularly tough case file when Mr. Coleman walked by. He stopped, looking over my shoulder at the piles of legal journals and notes spread out in front of me. "Don't you ever go home, Emily?" he asked, an eyebrow raised in amusement or maybe respect. I couldn't tell which. "Not until I figure this out," I answered without looking up. "This case could set a precedent, and I think there's an angle we've missed." Mr. Coleman grunted, pulling up a chair. "Show me." We spent the next hour discussing the case back and forth, with me arguing my point based on a precedent I found that could help our client. Finally, he leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Not bad. Emily, not bad at all. You've got a sharp mind for this. Keep it up and you'll make a fine lawyer. The day I graduated, I felt a mix of pride and nostalgia. Aunt Sarah was in the front row, clapping louder than anyone else, her eyes shining with tears. After the ceremony, as we walked out of the auditorium, she hugged me tight. "You've done it, Emily. All those years of hard work, and here you are," she said, pulling back to look at me with that proud, unwavering support that had become my rock. "I couldn't have done it without you, Aunt Sarah. You believed in me when no one else did, not even myself," I said, my own eyes misty. With a law degree in hand, I started applying for jobs. The market was competitive, brutal even, but I was not deterred. I sent out dozens of applications, went on several nerve-wracking interviews, and finally, I got a call that would start the next chapter of my life. "Miss Emily, this is Jared from Mason & Associates. I'm pleased to inform you that we'd like to offer you the position. Your internship performance was highly recommended by Mr. Coleman, and we believe you'd be a great fit." I almost dropped the phone. "Thank you, Jared. I'd be honored to accept." When Aunt Sarah told me my sister Anna had never graduated college due to her early pregnancy and quick marriage, I wasn't really surprised. Aunt Sarah's health took a turn for the worse not long after that revelation. I was at work, buried in files, when I got the call from the hospital. My world stopped. I barely remember grabbing my things and rushing out. Everything after that was a blur until I reached her side. She was weak, her voice barely a whisper, but her eyes were the same, sharp and knowing. "Emily," she murmured as I took her hand, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. "I'm here, Aunt Sarah. I'm right here," I managed to say, my voice trembling. She squeezed my hand, her grip frail but firm. "You did good, kid. I'm so proud of you. You remember what I always told you? To be strong, to stand up for yourself," I replied, the tears I had been holding back now streaming down my face. "That's right, and you have," she said, her voice growing fainter. "I've left you something in my will. The house. It's yours now." I nodded, unable to speak, squeezing her hand. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. Later that night, she passed away quietly in her sleep. The months following her death were a blur of legal matters and settling into the house that was now legally mine. I transformed it into something that felt like a real home for the first time in my life. Then, out of the blue, my parents and Anna with her husband and kids decided to visit. I should have known they weren't just coming to check on how I was holding up. As soon as Anna walked in, she started inspecting the place like she was at an open house, commenting on every piece of furniture and layout. "Oh, this would be perfect for the kids," she said loudly. "Look at all the space, Mom." Her husband nodded, adding, "Yeah, we could really spread out here." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. It wasn't until my mother chimed in that I lost it. "Emily, you should really think about letting Anna have the house. They need the space, what with the kids and all. You can manage fine in a smaller place, can't you?" I stared at them, disbelief turning quickly into anger. "Are you serious? This is my house. Aunt Sarah left it to me, not to Anna. I'm not going anywhere." Anna, who had been pretty quiet, finally piped up, her voice dripping with entitlement. "But you don't need all the space, Emily. It's just you here. We're a family of 5. It just makes sense for us to have it." That's when I laughed. It wasn't because anything was funny, but because the sheer audacity of their request was absurd. You think just because you have kids and a husband I have to give up my home? That's not how this works. Mom looked shocked. "Emily, don't be greedy. Think of the family." "Family?" I scoffed, the word bitter in my mouth. Where was this family when I needed a place to stay? When I needed help? They didn't have an answer to that. "Look, I said, my voice firm as I stood up taller. I appreciate you all coming here, but this house is mine. Aunt Sarah wanted me to have it, and I'm going to honor her wish. You need to leave now. Anna's husband tried to argue, his face turning red, but I didn't let him get far. Out, all of you now, or I'll call the police. They muttered about me being ungrateful and greedy as they gathered their things. Anna shot me a look that could freeze lava, her disappointment clear. But as they left, the weight on my shoulders lifted. I had stood up for myself, for my home, and for Aunt Sarah's memory. I came home from work to the most absurd situation. I couldn't get into my own house. The locks had been changed. Before I could process what was happening, I heard noises inside and started banging on the door. It swung open, and there stood my sister Anna, with her husband and their kids scattered behind her. "We've decided to move in here," she declared with a smug look, as if it was the most natural decision in the world. "What are you talking about? This is my house," I snapped, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. Anna shrugged, unbothered. "Well, we need it more than you do. We've already moved everything in." "That's not how any of this works, Anna. I'm calling the police," I said, fumbling for my phone. She laughed, clearly thinking I was bluffing. "Sure, go ahead." I dialed 911 while we waited. Our parents showed up, drawn by the commotion. They sided with Anna, of course. "Emily, why are you being so difficult? This is family. We should stick together," Mom said, her voice high-pitched and nervous. Dad frowned at me. "This is just plain wrong, and you know it," I shot back, the reality of the situation making my hand shake with rage. Anna's husband, who'd been silent until then, stepped up. "Just drop it, Emily, otherwise you'll regret it," he sneered, his tone menacing. I started recording on my phone, aiming it at him. "Threaten me again and it's on record." He lunged for the phone, but I sidestepped him. Right then, the police arrived. It didn't take long for them to assess the situation. My sister was crying now, her kids confused and scared. Anna's husband kept saying, "It's just a family matter," trying to downplay his earlier aggression. Mom was sobbing by now, pleading with the officers. "Please, they're just kids, they don't understand. We're her family." I took a deep breath before I explained to the police. They broke in and changed the locks. I didn't give them permission. This is my house. The officers were firm. Breaking into a house and changing the locks is illegal, even if you are family, one of them told Anna and her husband. Finally realizing the seriousness of the situation, my family's bluster faded. The police made it clear they had to leave, reluctantly, and with plenty of resentful glances thrown my way. They gathered their things. After the police left, I called a locksmith to change the locks again, this time making sure no one else had the keys. As I stood in the doorway of my reclaimed space, the silence was heavy, filled with the echoes of the confrontation. A few months later, I met Mike. He was a friend of a friend introduced to me at a small gathering. Mike was easy to talk to, with a straightforward way about him that I appreciated. "So you've had quite the year, huh?" Mike said, handing me a drink with a knowing smile. "You could say that?" I replied, the corner of my mouth tilting up in a half smile. "It's been eventful." As the evening went on, we talked about everything and nothing. Music, books, our shared disdain for soggy French fries. It was refreshing talking to someone who didn't see me as the overlooked sister or the woman who kicked her family out. Weeks turned into months, and Mike started coming around more often. One quiet evening, as we sat watching a movie with a bowl of popcorn between us, Mike turned to me. "Emily, I've been thinking," he began, pausing the movie. "Yeah?" I responded, my heart skipping a beat. "I really like what we have. I mean, I know your house is your sanctuary, but I was wondering if you'd be okay with me being a more permanent part of it," he asked, his voice tender. I looked at him, really looked, and saw everything I needed in a sincere, hopeful gaze. "I'd like that," I said simply, and a smile lit up the room. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it felt a whole lot lighter with Mike by my side. We faced a few more challenges, like when Anna tried to stir up trouble again by spreading rumors about me being heartless. But this time, I didn't face it alone. "Let them talk," Mike said one evening after I got a frustrating call from Mom telling me how upset Anna was. "The people who know you really know you. They know the truth. That's all that matters." He was right, and slowly I began to let go of the anger and resentment. It wasn't worth holding on to. Instead, I focused on the good, the home I was building, both the physical walls around me and the emotional barriers I was letting down.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.